The grain of wheat looked dead under the halogen lights. Leo Thorne held it between his thumb and forefinger. A single, desiccated kernel pressed flat inside a crystal paperweight. His $4,200 desk. His $8 million view of the downtown skyline. His empire of glass and steel and perfectly calibrated algorithms. And one piece of wheat that refused to rot. Mr. Thorne. He didn't turn from the window. His chief acquisitions officer, Marcus Chun, knew better than to expect eye contact during these moments. The Riverside Development portfolio is ready for your signature. 15 properties. Total clearance achieved on 14. And the 15th? Marcus hesitated. Holdout, sir. Small commercial bakery. The owner's refusing all offers. Legal is recommending eminent domain proceedings. Leo's reflection in the glass didn't move, but his fingers tightened around the paperweight. What's the address? 447 Riverside. Why? Because 22 years ago, that address had a different number. Because the building next to it had a wooden porch. Because a girl in a flour-dusted apron had appeared in the doorway while he sat on the curb, 8 years old, hollow-eyed, 3 days without food. Are you hungry? She hadn't waited for an answer, just ran inside and came back with a wicker basket. The bread was still warm. Cancel the eminent domain. Marcus blinked. Sir, you heard me. But the timeline, the investors are expecting. I said cancel it. Leo turned, and Marcus took an involuntary step back. And get me everything we have on the current owner. Name, financials, legal situation. Everything. Of course. When do you need it? Leo glanced at his watch. 11:47 p.m. 1 hour. The door closed. Leo returned to the window, to the glittering grid of the city he'd conquered. Somewhere down there, in the warm orange glow of the Riverside district, was the bakery. He'd driven past it 6 months ago. Hadn't stopped. Hadn't even slowed down. But he'd seen the sign. Marshall's Heritage Bread. Yes, T 2003. And he'd seen her. Older, tired, locking the door with hands that trembled slightly. The same hands that had placed a loaf in his when the world had looked away. He opened his desk drawer. Inside, preserved in archival plastic, was the wicker basket. He'd spent 4 years tracking it down, hired 3 separate firms, followed a trail through estate sales and donation centers and finally a storage unit in Newark. He'd paid $50,000 for a basket worth maybe $12. Best investment he'd ever made. His phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Asterisk file ready. Sending now. Asterisk. Leo opened the attachment. Sarah Marshall. Age 30. Owner Marshall's Heritage Bread. He scrolled past the basic information, address, tax records, business registration. His eyes moved faster, hunting. Then he found it. Outstanding debts. $847,000. Creditor, Viper Holdings LLC. Status. Final notice sent. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. Auction date. February 14th. 3 weeks. Leo's jaw clenched. He kept reading. Viper Holdings. A subsidiary of Cressman Development. Predatory loans disguised as small business support. Interest rates that compounded weekly. Legal teams that buried borrowers in paperwork until they had no choice but to sign away their property. He'd seen this pattern before. Hell, he'd disrupted this pattern before, bought out 2 similar operations last year, gutted their executive teams, returned the properties to their original owners. But he'd never seen a case this ugly. Sarah had borrowed $50,000 3 years ago to keep the bakery afloat during the pandemic. Standard terms, or so the contract claimed. But buried in Section 47, subsection C, was a clause that triggered penalty rates if revenue dropped below a certain threshold for 3 consecutive months. The debt had ballooned. $50,000 became $200,000. Then $400,000. Now $847,000, with interest accruing at $340 per day. For a bakery that netted maybe $60,000 a year. They'd designed it to fail. Leo stood, walked to the window, pressed his palm against the cold glass. 22 years ago, Sarah Marshall had given him bread when he was starving. Tonight, he'd learned that she was standing in a bread line herself, fighting a battle she couldn't win, drowning in a system built to swallow people like her. The city sprawled below him, indifferent and glittering. He pulled out his phone. "Marcus, I need you to set up a shell acquisition. Immediate priority. For the Riverside properties? No. For Viper Holdings." Pause. "Sir, Viper's not for sale. Everything's for sale. Find their pressure points. I want a controlling interest in that company within 2 weeks." "That's ambitious." "Then be ambitious." He ended the call, turned back to his desk, picked up the paperweight and held it to the light. The wheat kernel inside had been pressed into the dough of the bread Sarah gave him. He'd found it years later, dried and preserved by accident in the pocket of the jacket he'd worn that day. The jacket he'd refused to throw away. The jacket that survived 6 foster homes and 4 years on the street and every fire he'd tried to burn his past in. Some things refused to die. He placed the paperweight back on the desk. Next to it, he set a photograph, the only one he had of Sarah. Grainy, pulled from a 2019 community newsletter about local businesses. She was smiling, holding a tray of golden loaves, her eyes bright. That smile was gone now. He'd seen it 6 months ago, watched the light in her face flicker and fade like a candle running out of wick. But he was going to bring it back. "You gave me life when I had nothing," he said to the photograph. "Now I have everything, and I'm going to make sure you get yours back." The city lights blurred. Leo blinked, surprised to find his vision wet. He hadn't cried in 18 years. But then again, he hadn't owed anyone a debt this deep in 18 years either. The dough fought back. Sarah Marshall leaned into the counter, her forearms burning as she kneaded the mass of flour and water and starter. It was 4:47 a.m. The ovens were still heating. The street outside was dark except for the flicker of a single broken streetlight. This was her favorite time, when the bakery was hers alone, when she could pretend the letters from Viper Holdings didn't exist, when she could believe just for an hour that everything would be okay. The dough began to yield. She folded it, turned it, folded again. Muscle memory, her mother's hands, teaching her. "Feel the gluten, Sarah. It'll tell you when it's ready." Her mother had been gone for 5 years now. Heart attack, quick and cruel and without warning. The bakery was all Sarah had left of her. And in 3 weeks she'd lose that too. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. Probably another automated reminder from the bank. Or worse, another offer from Viper's relocation specialist. A man named Dennis Crow who wore cologne that smelled like gasoline and smiled like a shark. Asterisk, "We're trying to help you, Ms. Marshall. Let us take this burden off your shoulders." Asterisk. She'd rather burn the place down herself. The dough was ready. She shaped it into rounds, placed them in proofing baskets, covered them with linen. Then she moved to the ovens, sliding in yesterday's loaves, rosemary focaccia, sourdough boules, olive ciabatta. The heat rolled over her. Familiar, comforting. The front door rattled. Sarah froze. It was 5:03 a.m. She wasn't open. Wasn't even close to open. The rattling stopped. Then came a knock. Soft, deliberate. She grabbed the closest thing to a weapon, a wooden peel, and moved toward the front. Through the glass, she could see a figure in a long coat, backlit by the broken streetlight. "We're closed," she called. "I know." The voice was male, calm. "I'm not here for bread." "Then what do you want?" A pause. "I want to talk about Viper Holdings." Sarah's blood went cold. She opened the door a crack, peel still in hand. "Who are you?" The man stepped into the light. Tall, mid-30s, with dark hair and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in days. Expensive coat. Expensive shoes. The kind of person who didn't belong in her neighborhood at 5 a.m. "My name is Leo Thorne, and I think we can help each other." Sarah's grip on the peel tightened. "If you're from Viper." "I'm not." He held up his hands, empty. "I'm the opposite of Viper. I'm someone who wants to see you keep this place." "Why?" "Because," he stopped, looked past her into the bakery. His eyes moved over the racks of cooling bread, the worn wooden counters, the old brass register that Sarah's great-grandmother had used. When he looked back at her, something in his face had changed. Because a long time ago, someone in this building gave me food when I was starving. And I never forgot it. Sarah stared at him. I don't know you. I know. I was 8. You were probably, 10? 11? Her breath caught. The porch. Leo nodded slowly. The porch. The wooden peel clattered to the floor. Leo's stomach hadn't stopped screaming for 3 days. He pressed his forehead against the bakery window, watching golden loaves pile high behind glass he'd never touch. 14 years old and already invisible. The kind of invisible that comes from wearing the same shirt 5 days straight, from shoes held together with duct tape and desperation. The smell of fresh bread made him dizzy. He'd tried everything. Begged at the market until the vendors chased him off. Searched dumpsters behind restaurants until bigger, meaner boys claimed them as territory. His mother was gone 3 months now, maybe 4. Time blurred when you were hungry enough. The shelter turned him away last week. Too young, they said. Too much liability. Leo's vision swam. He gripped the window frame to steady himself. That's when he felt the hand on his shoulder. He spun around. Fists raised, learned reflex from sleeping rough but froze. A girl stood there, maybe 16, wearing a sun-drenched yellow apron streaked with flour. Her eyes were dark and searching, the kind that saw through the dirt and shame straight into the hollow place where hope used to live. You hungry? She asked, her accent thick with something he couldn't place. Leo's throat closed. He managed a nod. She glanced back at the bakery, then at him, calculating something. My uncle owns this place. He's not kind to street kids. Her jaw tightened. But he's going to break for lunch in 10 minutes. When he does, go around back. The blue door. I'll leave it unlocked. Why would you? Because I remember, she said simply. 10 minutes. Don't be late. She disappeared back inside before he could ask her name. Leo counted every second. Each one felt like swallowing glass. What if it was a trap? What if she told her uncle and they called the police? What if? The back door cracked open. Steam poured out, carrying the smell of heaven. The girl appeared in the doorway, holding a paper bag that looked too heavy, too generous to be real. Quick, she whispered. But as Leo reached for it, a shadow fell across them both. A man's voice, cold and sharp as winter, cut through the alley. Maria, what the hell do you think you're doing? 20 years later, Leo owned the world. His penthouse stretched across the 68th floor like a monument to everything he'd clawed his way toward. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Manhattan like a conquest. Below, millions of people moved through lives he'd never touch, never feel, never care about. The city glittered with a coldness that matched the ice in his veins. He stood at those windows now, phone pressed to his ear, dismantling a competitor's merger with 3 sentences. Billions shifted with his words. Men twice his age stammered apologies. Power tasted like nothing at all. Done, he said, ending the call mid-sentence. His assistant appeared at the door, tablet glowing. Mr. Castellano, the Forbes interview is in 20 minutes. They want to discuss your latest acquisition. Cancel it. Sir, this is the 3rd one this month. I said cancel it. His voice carried the weight of a guillotine. She disappeared without another word. They all did eventually. Leo returned to the window. His reflection stared back. Sharp suit, sharper edges. A face that women called handsome and men called ruthless. Both were right. Both meant nothing. He'd built an empire on the bones of his hunger, transformed starvation into strategy, desperation into domination. The boy who'd pressed his face against bakery windows was dead. Good. That boy was weak. His phone buzzed. A text from his lawyer. Settlement finalized. She signed. You're officially divorced. 3 years of marriage ended with a signature. Vanessa had cried during the prenup negotiations, laughed at the wedding, screamed during the separation. He'd felt nothing through all of it. Not rage, not relief, not even satisfaction. Just the familiar emptiness that had lived in his chest since. No, he didn't think about that anymore. Leo poured himself scotch older than most of his employees. Drank it without tasting. The penthouse was silent except for the whisper of climate control, the hum of technology maintaining his perfect, sterile world. His phone rang again. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then something. Instinct, intuition, the ghost of a 14-year-old boy who still lived somewhere deep in his bones, made him pick up. A woman's voice, trembling and urgent. Leo Castellano? Who is this? You don't know me, but I know what you did 20 years ago. I know about the fire. I know about Maria. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering across marble. Maria's dead. No, the woman whispered. She's not, and she's in terrible danger. Leo hung up. His hands shook, actually shook, for the first time in a decade. Maria's name was a detonation in his carefully constructed silence. He'd buried her 20 years ago, buried the memory of flames and sirens and his own cowardice in running when he should have stayed. The woman was lying. Had to be. Some con artist who'd done her research found the old newspaper articles, thought she could squeeze money from. His phone lit up again. Same number. He stared at it, jaw clenched, then hurled it across the room. It didn't help. Nothing helped. Leo moved through his penthouse like a ghost haunting his own life. Poured another scotch. Turned on the television just to drown out the screaming in his head. Financial news flickered across the screen. Markets, mergers, the mechanical heartbeat of money making money. Then the segment changed. Devastating impact on small business owners. The anchor was saying, "Our report takes us to Brooklyn, where generational businesses are closing at unprecedented rates." The camera cut to a street Leo almost recognized. Faded awnings, cracked sidewalks, the kind of neighborhood gentrification was slowly devouring. And then he saw her. The woman on screen stood in front of a small bakery, its windows dark, a closed sign hanging crooked on the door. She wore an apron. Not sun-drenched yellow anymore, but faded blue, worn thin by years. Her face had aged, lines carved by struggle and time, but those eyes, God, those eyes were exactly the same. Sarah Delgado has run her family's bakery for 15 years. The reporter continued. But rising rents and corporate competition have finally forced her to close. Sarah. Maria had changed her name. Leo stood frozen as she spoke on screen, her voice trembling with exhaustion and defiance. My uncle started this place 40 years ago. It survived recessions, riots, everything. But we can't survive what's happening now. These developers, these corporations, they don't see businesses. They see real estate. They don't see people. They see profit margins. The camera zoomed in on the building behind her. Leo's vision tunneled. He recognized the logo on the development sign in the background. Recognized it because he'd approved the acquisition 3 months ago. A portfolio purchase, his team had called it. 12 Brooklyn properties. Small-time holdings. Easy teardowns. He owned the building that was destroying her. His phone buzzed on the floor where he'd thrown it. A new text from the unknown number. Now do you believe me? They're coming for her tonight. You have 4 hours to decide who you really are. Leo made the first call at 2 a.m. Marcus, I need you to pull the Brooklyn portfolio. Yes, all 12 properties. No, I don't care what time it is. He paced his penthouse, mind racing faster than it had in years. Find me the owner of 347 Hartley Street specifically. I want the lease terms, the holding company, everything. His CFO's voice crackled with confusion. Boss, that's a bakery. Worth maybe 200,000. Why would you? Because I'm asking. Get it done. Leo hung up and opened his laptop. The glow illuminated his face in the darkness as he pulled up acquisition files, shell companies, transfer documents. His fingers moved with surgical precision across the keyboard. If they were coming for her tonight, he had 4 hours to become invisible. By 3 a.m., he'd created 3 separate LLCs, each buried under layers of legal entities that would take a forensic accountant months to untangle. By 4 a.m., he'd identified the development group pressuring Sarah, Meridian Holdings, a vulture fund that specialized in exactly this kind of predatory displacement. By 5 a.m., he owned 15% of Meridian Holdings. His phone rang. Marcus, breathless. Leo, what the hell are you doing? You just moved $40 million. I'm buying leverage. Get me a call with Meridian's CEO. This morning. It's Sunday. Then wake him up. Leo stood at his windows watching dawn break over Manhattan. The city looked different now, less like a conquest and more like a chessboard. Sarah's bakery was out there somewhere in Brooklyn, dark and vulnerable, waiting for wolves in suits to tear it apart. Not today. His computer chimed. An encrypted message from a contact he hadn't used in 5 years. An information broker who specialized in corporate espionage. You asked about threats to 347 Hartley. Found something. Meridian's not just buying the building. They've got someone on the inside. Someone feeding them information about Delgado's finances, her lease violations, everything. She's being sabotaged. Leo's blood went cold. Who? Still digging. But Leo, whoever it is, has access to her personal accounts. Bank statements. Medical records. They know everything about her. Another message appeared, this one from the unknown number that had started all of this. You're making moves. Good. But you're too late. Check the news. Leo's hands flew across his keyboard, pulling up local news feeds. The headlines stopped his heart. Brooklyn bakery owner hospitalized after suspected poisoning. Foul play suspected. Leo found her at the farmer's market in Red Hook. He'd called every hospital in Brooklyn until a tired nurse finally confirmed Sarah Delgado had been treated and released. Minor food poisoning, they'd said. Lucky, they'd said. Leo knew better. This was a warning shot. She stood behind a fold-out table covered with a checkered cloth, selling bread from plastic crates. No fancy display, no signage. Just her, an apron, and loaves wrapped in brown paper. The girl who'd saved him had become a woman fighting a war she didn't even know she was in. Leo approached slowly, ball cap pulled low, wearing jeans and a jacket that cost more than her monthly rent but looked ordinary enough. His security team waited 2 blocks away. He'd come alone. How much? He asked, pointing to a sourdough. Sarah looked up. Her face was pale, exhausted, but those eyes still carried that same fierce warmth. $8. Fresh this morning. He handed her a 20. Keep it. I don't take charity. She pushed the change toward him firmly. Something cracked in his chest. It's not charity. The bread's worth it. She studied him then, really looked at him, and Leo felt naked under that gaze. You're not from around here, she said. Not a question. No. Let me guess. Manhattan? You've got that look. She tore off a piece of bread and offered it to him. Here, taste before you buy. I'm not running a con. Leo took it. The bread was warm, perfect, tasting like every memory he'd spent 20 years trying to forget. He couldn't speak. Good, right? Sarah smiled, and it transformed her entire face. My uncle's recipe. Only thing he left me that was worth keeping. Your uncle. Dead 6 years now. Heart attack. She said it matter-of-factly, but pain flickered beneath. This bakery was his dream. Now it's mine. Or it was, until. She trailed off, jaw tightening. Until what? Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face went white. I have to go. Wait. But she was already packing up with shaking hands, throwing bread into crates with barely controlled panic. Leo caught her wrist. What's wrong? She looked at him with eyes full of terror. Someone just sent me photos of my apartment from inside while I was sleeping last night. Her phone buzzed again. She turned the screen toward him with trembling hands. The message read, Stop fighting. Sell. Or next time you won't wake up. The eviction notice arrived 3 days later. Leo knew because he'd been watching Sarah's building from a coffee shop across the street, his laptop open, his security team tracking every person who came within 50 feet of her door. He saw the process server hand her the envelope, saw her face crumble as she read it. 30 days. That's all she had left. His phone rang. Marcus. Boss, we've got a problem. Meridian just sold the Brooklyn portfolio. Leo's blood froze. To who? Viper Holdings. The name hit like a punch. Viper Holdings wasn't a development company. They were corporate executioners. They specialized in hostile takeovers, scorched earth tactics, legal warfare designed to break people into dust. Leo had competed against them twice. Lost once. Never wanted to again. They overpaid by 30%, Marcus continued, which means they want that location badly. And Leo, they've already filed 6 code violations against the bakery. Health department, fire safety, structural integrity. All dated yesterday. That's impossible. The building was inspected last month. Inspected by officials who are now on Viper's consulting payroll. Leo's hand tightened around his phone. Get me everything on Viper. Ownership structure, board members, financials. Everything. He watched Sarah through the window. She sat on her apartment steps, head in her hands. The eviction notice crumpled beside her. A woman walked past without looking. A kid on a skateboard swerved around her. The world kept moving while hers collapsed. Leo stood to cross the street. His phone buzzed. A text from his information broker. Found your mole. You're not going to like it. A photo loaded. Leo's vision tunneled. The man in the image was Sarah's lawyer, Thomas Chen, the one she'd trusted to fight the eviction. The same lawyer who'd been feeding Viper every piece of confidential information, every legal strategy, every weakness. Leo was already moving when another text arrived from the unknown number that had started everything. She's meeting with Chun right now. He's going to convince her to settle, to walk away with nothing. You have 20 minutes. Leo burst out of the coffee shop and ran. But he was already too late. Through Sarah's apartment window, he could see her signing papers at her kitchen table. Chun stood over her, pointing where to initial, his smile sharp as a blade. The door opened. Chun emerged, briefcase in hand, whistling. He looked directly at Leo and winked. The boardroom went silent. 15 faces stared at Leo like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. He stood at the head of the table, hands flat on the mahogany surface, still wearing the jeans and jacket from the street. He hadn't slept in 48 hours. Hadn't shaved. Didn't care. Run that by us again, said Victoria Chen. His lead counsel and no relation to the traitor lawyer. Her voice carried surgical precision. You want to allocate $200 million to acquire Viper Holdings, a company we have no strategic interest in, to protect a single bakery worth less than the coffee budget for this meeting? Yes. Leo. Marcus leaned forward, his expression pained. We're fiduciaries. We have shareholders. You can't just. I can. I'm majority shareholder. This is happening. An older board member, Gerald, removed his glasses slowly. Son, I've known you for 12 years. Watched you build this empire from nothing. Never seen you make an emotional decision. Don't start now. This isn't emotional. Then what is it? Leo's jaw tightened. How could he explain? That 20 years ago a girl in a yellow apron had saved his life? That he'd run when flames consumed her uncle's bakery? Left her to face the aftermath alone while he crawled his way to the top on the foundation of his own cowardice? That every dollar he'd made, every victory he'd claimed, was built on the bones of the one debt he could never repay? It's strategic, he said instead. Viper Holdings has been undercutting us in 3 markets. This acquisition eliminates a competitor and… Bullshit. Victoria stood, her eyes blazing. I pulled Viper's financials. They're worth 80 million, maybe 90. You're offering 200. And I know why. The room froze. I saw the Brooklyn files on your computer, Leo. I know about Sarah Delgado. I know you've been tracking her for days. Victoria's voice softened, turning dangerous. And I know that 3 board members here are also on Viper's advisory council. Congratulations. You just telegraphed your entire strategy to the enemy. Leo's blood turned to ice. 3 board members stood simultaneously. Gerald, Thomas Park, Jennifer Wu. Their faces were masks of polite regret. We resign effective immediately, Gerald said. And Leo? Viper just accelerated Sarah's eviction. She has 72 hours. They walked out. Leo's phone buzzed. A video message from an unknown number. He pressed play. The footage showed Sarah in her apartment, packing boxes with tears streaming down her face. The timestamp read, "Live." Then the camera panned. A man stood in her doorway. Leo recognized him from corporate filings, Marcus Viper himself, founder of Viper Holdings. "Ms. Delgado," Viper's voice purred through the speakers. "We need to have a conversation about your uncle, and the real reason his bakery burned down 20 years ago." Leo kicked down Sarah's door. Viper spun around, hand reaching inside his jacket. 2 bodyguards materialized from the hallway. But Leo's security team was already there. 4 men who moved like shadows, weapons drawn, creating a barrier of controlled violence. "Get out," Leo said, his voice deadly calm. Sarah stood frozen by her kitchen table, face tear-streaked and confused. "What? Who are you people?" Viper smiled slowly. "Ah, Leo Castellano. Right on time." He spread his hands peacefully. "Gentlemen, lower your weapons. We're all civilized here. You broke into her home." The door was unlocked. "I was concerned for Ms. Delgado's safety." Viper's eyes glittered with malice. "Especially given the dangerous accusations she's been making about my company." "I haven't made any," Sarah started. "Not yet." Viper pulled out his phone, tapped the screen. "But you were about to the media. About how Viper Holdings orchestrated your uncle's death 20 years ago. Arson disguised as an electrical fire. Very serious allegations." The room tilted. Leo's vision narrowed to a pinpoint. "That's insane," Sarah whispered. "My uncle died in an accident," the fire marshal said. The fire marshal was paid $50,000 to write that report. Viper's voice turned sharp as broken glass. "Just like your lawyer was paid to sabotage your case. Just like the health inspectors, the code enforcement, all of it. We've been planning this acquisition for 2 years, Ms. Delgado. Your bakery sits on a property line worth $40 million in development rights. We always get what we want." Sarah swayed. Leo caught her elbow, steadying her. She looked at him with eyes full of betrayal and confusion. "Who are you?" "Someone who owes you everything," Leo said quietly. Then he turned to Viper. "You want the property? Let's settle this properly. Public auction. Tomorrow. Highest bidder wins." Viper laughed. "You're joking." "Courthouse steps. Noon. Every media outlet in New York watching. You claim you're legitimate? Prove it. Or are you afraid of a fair fight?" Something flickered in Viper's expression. Surprise, then calculation, then cruel satisfaction. "You're going to bankrupt yourself over a bakery. Fine, I accept. But let's make it interesting." He stepped closer to Sarah, his smile widening. "When I win, and I will win, Ms. Delgado doesn't just lose the building. She signs an NDA. Permanent. Everything about her uncle, the fire, all of it buried forever." "And when I win?" Leo asked. "You won't." "When I win." Viper's jaw tightened. "Then I'll give you the fire marshal's original report. The real one. Unredacted. Including the name of who paid for the arson." Sarah gasped. "There's proof." "Oh, there's proof." Viper pulled out a flash drive, dangled it like bait. "Everything. Photos, payment records, even audio recordings of the man who hired us." He pocketed it again. "See you at noon, Castellano." He walked out, bodyguards following. Leo turned to Sarah. She was shaking, fury and fear warring across her face. "Tell me you're not him," she whispered. "Tell me you're not the man who killed my uncle." Before Leo could answer, his phone rang. Marcus. Frantic. "Leo, we have a massive problem. Someone just shorted our stock. $300 million. If you spend what you're planning tomorrow, if this auction fails, the company collapses. And I found out who placed the short." "Who?" "Your ex-wife, Vanessa. She's working with Viper." Sarah slammed her hand on the table. "Answer me. Did you kill my uncle?" "No." Leo's voice cracked. "But I should have saved him." The words hung between them like shattered glass. Sarah's eyes searched his face, desperate for truth, terrified of lies. What does that mean? Who are you? Leo pulled off his cap. Let her see him fully, the boy he'd been underneath the man he'd become. 20 years ago, I was starving. 14 years old, living on the streets. I pressed my face against your uncle's bakery window because I hadn't eaten in 3 days. Sarah's breath caught. A girl found me there. 16, maybe. Yellow apron covered in flour. She snuck me food through the back door. Your uncle caught us. Started shouting. Then, Leo's voice broke. Then I ran. Like a coward. I heard the explosion 2 blocks away. Saw the smoke. I should have gone back. Should have helped. Instead I kept running. Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks. Maria. You're talking about Maria. I didn't know her real name until 3 days ago. That was me, you idiot. Sarah's voice was raw, furious, grief-stricken. I was Maria. I changed my name after the fire because... She choked on the words. Because everyone said I started it. That I left the gas on. That my uncle died because of my carelessness. The room spun. Leo gripped the table. That's impossible. You gave me food. You saved. And then you left me to burn. The accusation was a knife between his ribs. True and terrible and earned. Leo moved to his jacket, hands shaking, and pulled out something he'd carried for 20 years. Piece of wicker. Scorched black on one edge, preserved in a plastic case like a holy relic. The basket, Sarah whispered. The one I put the bread in. I went back the next morning. Found it in the wreckage. It's the only thing that survived. Leo's eyes were wet. I built everything, every dollar, every company, every goddamn skyscraper. Trying to become someone worthy of what you gave me that day. Someone who wouldn't run. Sarah reached for the wicker with trembling fingers. Touched it like a prayer. But I'm still running, Leo said. Because I never told you the truth. I saw something that day. Before the explosion. A man arguing with your uncle through the front window. Threatening him. I was too scared to tell the police. Too afraid they'd send me back to the shelters. What man? Sarah's voice was ice. Leo pulled out his phone. Showed her a photo he'd found in corporate archives. Him. Sarah's face went white. That's Marcus Viper. 30 years younger. But... She looked up, eyes blazing. You're saying he killed my uncle? And you knew. Before Leo could answer, the windows exploded inward. Glass shattered across the apartment as a brick sailed through, wrapped in paper. Sarah screamed. Leo shoved her behind him as his security team burst inside. Weapons drawn. The brick rolled to Leo's feet. He picked up the paper, unfolded it with shaking hands. Written in blood-red ink. The auction is off. Sarah dies at midnight. Your choice, Castellano, save the girl or save your empire. You can't have both. P.S. We have the original fire marshal's report. And the recording of you telling the police you saw nothing. Sweet dreams. Leo had 6 hours to decide who he wanted to be. He made the call at 6 p.m., standing in Sarah's destroyed apartment surrounded by broken glass and security teams and the weight of 20 years of cowardice. Marcus, he said to his CFO, liquidate everything. Silence. Then, Leo, that's insane. The stock price will. I don't care. Sell it all. Every holding, every asset, every property except the Brooklyn portfolio. I want cash. 300 million. By midnight. You'll destroy the company. Good. It was built on lies anyway. Leo hung up. Sarah grabbed his arm. What are you doing? Buying Viper Holdings outright. No auction. No games. I pay whatever it costs, and this ends tonight. They'll kill you. That note said. They said I couldn't have both. They were wrong. Leo cupped her face with shaking hands. I'm not running anymore. The next 6 hours were war. Leo's lawyers moved like surgical strikes, filing injunctions, restraining orders, emergency motions. His security team swept Sarah's building, found 3 more explosive devices, dismantled them with minutes to spare. His information broker cracked Viper's encrypted servers, downloaded everything, the fire marshal's real report, the payment records, Audio recordings of Marcus Viper ordering the arson that killed Sarah's uncle. At 11:47 p.m., Leo walked into Viper Holdings headquarters with the flash drive and a cashier's check for $400 million. Viper sat behind his desk, smiling like a snake. You actually did it. Destroyed your empire for a girl. For what's right. Leo slid the check across the desk. This buys your company, your silence, and every piece of evidence you have. Take it and disappear. Viper picked up the check, studied it, laughed. You know what's funny? I was bluffing. About killing her. About the midnight deadline. All of it. He tore the check in half. But you weren't bluffing about liquidating everything. Which means your company is now worthless. And I can acquire it for pennies. Leo's blood turned to ice. Guards! Viper shouted. Nothing happened. Viper frowned. Pressed his security button. Still nothing. The door opened. Sarah walked in, followed by police, FBI agents, and a woman Leo had never seen before. Mid-50s, sharp eyes, carrying a federal badge. Marcus Viper, the woman said. You're under arrest for arson, murder, racketeering, and about 40 other charges. Thanks for the confession. She held up a recording device. Been recording for the last 5 minutes. Viper lunged for his desk drawer. Leo moved faster, slamming it shut on his fingers. Viper screamed. 2 months later, the bakery reopened. Sarah stood in the doorway wearing a sun-drenched yellow apron, exactly like the one from 20 years ago. The line stretched around the block, neighbors, reporters, curiosity seekers drawn by the media storm that had followed Viper's arrest and Leo's very public corporate collapse. Leo worked behind the counter, hands covered in flour, learning to knead dough the way Sarah's uncle had taught her. He'd lost everything. The penthouse was gone. The company dismantled and sold for parts. His fortune reduced to enough to rebuild one small bakery and start over. He'd never been happier. Next, Sarah called, smiling at a young girl who pressed her face against the glass display case. The girl's mother pulled her back gently. Sorry, we're just looking. Maybe next week when... It's free, Leo said, handing the girl a loaf wrapped in brown paper. First day special. The mother's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. As they left, Sarah leaned against Leo's shoulder. You know we can't afford to give away bread forever. We'll figure it out. Leo kissed the top of her head, breathing in flour and hope and second chances. The bell above the door chimed. A man walked in. Expensive suit. Cold eyes. He placed a business card on the counter. Sentinel Capital Partners. Hostile Acquisitions Division. Mr. Castellano, the man said, smiling like a shark. My employers are very interested in this property. We're prepared to offer you $10 million. Cash. Today. Sarah's hand found Leo's, squeezing tight. The bakery's not for sale, Leo said. Everything's for sale. The man leaned forward. Especially when we have photos of Ms. Delgado's immigration paperwork. Interesting story there. 20-year-old identity fraud charges that could get her deported within 72 hours. Unless, of course, you're willing to negotiate. He slid a folder across the counter. Sarah opened it with shaking hands. Her face went white. How did you? We know everything, Ms. Delgado. Or should I say, Maria Vega? The man's smile widened. You have 48 hours. Sell or she's on a plane to Mexico. Your choice, Mr. Castellano. Again.